The first question today is asked by Ash. What Ash has written is, everything happens according to destiny in this illusory world. We can try to change things, but our efforts will not bear fruit if not aligned to our destiny. We have free will only in ending the ego dream and nothing else. I'm not clear on the destiny part, i.e., where does free will end and destiny begin? For example, if I want to work in another country, and let's say it's not my destiny to work there, I travel to that place but don't get the job, no matter how much I try and take actions towards that end, because it's not my destiny to get a job there. Is going to that place a free will action and not getting the job destiny, or are both destiny? Is only the thinking, mental, desire part of trying considered free will and the action part destiny, or can both be thought, or can both thought and action be part of free will and destiny? I'm not clear on this. If a soul, that's one set of questions. And the next thing is, if a soul is ripe, as in the case of Bhagavan, was that ripeness, maturity of his soul from spiritual work done in previous lifetimes, retained, imprinted in destiny, so that it became easier for him to continue on where he left off, using his free will in his final life, in his final lifetime, and achieve ultimate liberation? And then I understand we need to be devoted to the direct path completely and leave the burdens of the illusory self to Bhagavan. Why carry the load on our heads when traveling by train? But how is this put into practice in day-to-day life? We can hear this 1,000 times, but still have difficulty putting it in practice. There are many decisions, actions we have to take every day. Can you please explain with some examples the thought process and actions would be for given situation that one faces? If one is dealing with a particular health situation right now and is not able to work, within brackets negative for illusory world, but spiritual practice has intensified as a result, positive for spirituality, what should be the thought action process of this individual on a day-to-day basis? Regarding destiny and free will, firstly, destiny, that is our prarabdha, is the fruits of actions that we've done in the past. That is fruits of actions that we've done in the past using by our own will. But any actions that we do by our will bear fruit, but they don't bear fruit immediately. Any actions we do in this lifetime, we can't experience the fruit of those actions in this lifetime, but the fruit of the actions we do by our will in this lifetime get added to the sanchita, which is the store of all the fruits of actions that are yet to be experienced. And from the sanchita, God or Guru or Bhagavan selects for each lifetime certain fruit that are to be experienced by us. Bhagavan selects the fruit that will be most conducive to our spiritual development. So the prarabdha is tailor-made by him to suit our spiritual development. Regarding free will, this is an area of a huge amount of confusion, not only among spiritual people, but among philosophers and among scientists. One of the confusions about free will is there are three types of freedom we may suppose we have. One is the freedom to want what we want. The second is the freedom to do what we want. And the third is the freedom to achieve what we want. Strictly speaking, only the first of these three is free will. That is, we are free to want whatever we want. The second one, freedom to do what we want, is not freedom of will, but freedom of action. And the third one, freedom to achieve what we want, that's another type of freedom. So let's consider each of these separately. Freedom of will, that is freedom to want what we want, we have absolute freedom to want whatever we want. No one can make us want what we don't want, and no one can prevent us wanting what we do want. We want whatever we want. That is a simple fact. So in that sense, our will is perfectly free. There's no limitation on the freedom of our will. The only seeming limitation on the freedom of our will is that we want many things. And often the things that we want, one desire clashes with another desire. We want to live a peaceful, happy life. That requires us to give up all our desires. But at the same time, we've got so many desires to experience other things. So our desires are in conflict with one another. If we want peace, we have to give up all desires. But we want peace, but we don't want to give up our desires. So there's a conflict there. But so the only limitation on the freedom of our will is internal limitations. That is, if we wanted one thing and one thing alone, if we wanted only to surrender to Bhagavan and to merge back into the source from which we rose, that would be the easiest thing to do. Why it seems to be difficult is because we want so many other things which conflict with this. So that is freedom of will. Then there's freedom of action and freedom of achievement. I'll deal with the freedom of achievement first, because we're absolutely free to want what we want. We have absolutely no freedom to achieve what we want. That is, we may want anything, but we will not achieve what we want unless it is in our prarabdha. Because prarabdha, as I said, it's the fruit of actions that we've done in the past. Prarabdha determines all that we are to experience in this life. That is all that is to happen to us. We cannot change prarabdha at all. We cannot add to it and we cannot subtract from it. So we have no freedom to achieve what we want. Sometimes it may seem, but I wanted such and such, and I worked for it and I achieved it. So it may seem that we have a freedom to achieve what we want, but we achieved it because it was in our destiny. If it wasn't in our destiny, however much we have wanted it, however much we had tried for it, we wouldn't have achieved it. So we have complete freedom to want what we want, no freedom to achieve what we want. What people find confusing is the middle one, our freedom to act. We do have freedom to act, but our freedom to act is limited. For example, I may want to, there's so many things I may want to do, but there are limitations on what I can do. So I can't do everything that I want to do. So as far as actions are concerned, which is what the main part of the first part of this question is, there are two forces driving the action. All actions are done by body, speech, and mind. The instigator of all actions is actually, let's say, mind, speech, and body. But it's the actions begin in the mind. We first decide to do say something or do something, then we do it. So the actions of our mind, speech, and body are driven by two forces. That is, by our free will and by destiny. In what sense are actions driven by destiny? The answer is, that is, in order to experience what we are destined to experience, we need to do certain actions. So those actions that are required for us to experience whatever we are destined to experience, we will be made to do those actions. That is what Bhagavan says in the first sentence of the note he wrote for his mother. Avarava prarabdha prakaram adhikanavan angan gerundu artavipan. That means, according to the destiny of each person, he who is for that will make them dance. That means we'll make them act. So we'll be made to do those actions that are necessary in order for us to experience our prarabdha. But at the same time, our actions, the actions of our body, speech, and mind are being driven by our own will. So these two forces are driving our actions. We cannot distinguish which action, to what extent each action is driven by either destiny or free will or both. Because we experience ourselves, when we rise as ego, we experience ourselves as body and mind. Therefore, whatever actions are done by body, speech, or mind are experienced by us as actions done by me. I am talking, I am thinking, I am sitting, I am running, whatever. All the actions of the body, speech, mind are experienced by us as actions done by me. Because we experience the body, speech, and mind as ourselves. So long as there is a sense of doership, we have a dense sense of doership both for the actions that are driven by our will and for the actions that are driven by destiny. So we cannot distinguish one from the other, and we need not. Many actions that we do according to destiny are also according to our will. For example, it's maybe our destiny to experience certain things that we want. So we want to achieve those things, and we're destined to achieve them. So both our will and our destiny, both are driving us to do those actions. In other cases, we are destined to experience things we don't want. So we may try to resist those things, but however much we try to resist, we cannot prevent them. What is to happen is going to happen. As Bhagavan wrote in the second and third sentences of the note to his mother, Endrum naduvadadu, vichikanum naduvadu. What is not to happen, what will not happen, what will never happen, will not happen, however much effort we make. Nadupadu in tadeseinum ṉiṭṭaiyuṟak. What is to happen will not stop, however much obstruction we make. So we are free to want to achieve what is not destined to happen, or to avoid what is destined to happen. We are free to try to achieve what is not destined to happen, and or to experience what is not destined to happen, and to avoid experiencing what is destined to happen. But we are not free to actually experience anything that we're not destined to experience, or to avoid experiencing what we are destined to experience. So we cannot distinguish which action is according to destiny, which action is according to our will. In retrospect, we can say that when we see the course of our life, we know what our destiny is up to this point in our life. So we can look back on our life and we can see, because I was destined to undergo such and such an experience, I was driven to do such and such an action. But even though we may be able to recognize that in retrospect, that doesn't mean that that action we did was solely driven by destiny. It may have been driven by destiny and by our will. So we cannot distinguish, and we need not distinguish. What we need to do, actions that are, so long as we rise as ego, we will have a will. That is, we'll have likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, and so on. So if we want to avoid doing actions according to our will, we need to turn within and thereby bring about the subsidence of ego. To the extent that ego subsides, its likes and dislikes will also subside, and therefore our actions will be less influenced by our will. So we have to tackle the problem of the actions that we do by our will are what are called agamya. If we want to reduce the amount of agamya we do, we need to curb our desires and attachments, our likes and dislikes. We can do so to a certain extent, just by various means, but the most effective means to do so is by turning our attention within, because when we turn our attention within, ego subsides, and when ego subsides, its desires will subside along with it. Of course, during the course of practice, we don't turn totally within. We may turn instead of turning a full 180 degrees, we may turn 60 degrees or 90 degrees or 120 degrees. But to the extent to which we turn within, to that extent ego will subside, and to that extent its desires and attachments, etc., will subside with it. So it is by curbing ego, but we reduce the amount of agamya we do. But we really need not be concerned about actions, because those actions what we are destined to do, we will be made to do. And other actions that are driven by our will continue so long as we give our will a free rein. In spiritual practice, we're trying to curb our outward going will. And the most effective means to do so is by turning within. So we need not concern ourselves too much about which actions are according to destiny and which actions are according to free will. One sentence Ash wrote here is, we have free will only in ending the ego dream and nothing else. That is not quite correct. What Bhagavan said is, the only correct use of our free will is to turn within and thereby bring an end to this dream. But we obviously we are misusing, we are free to use our will in in other ways, and it's because we use our will in other ways that we create agamya, the fruit of which gets stored in sanchita, and the cycle goes on. So I think that's most of the first paragraph answered. Another thing you asked, Ash asked is only the thinking, mental, desire part of trying considered free will and the action part destiny? No, it is not so. Body, speech, and mind are both driven by destiny and by will. Both, I mean, it's not just the actions of our mind that are driven by our will. Even the actions of our speech and body are also driven by our will. In the next question Ash asked is, if a soul is ripe, as in the case of Bhagavan, was that ripeness, maturity of his soul from spiritual work done in prior lifetimes retained, imprinted in destiny, so that it became easier for him to continue where he left off, using his free will in his final lifetime and achieve liberation? Firstly, liberation has nothing to do with destiny. That is, you cannot be destined to attain liberation, and you cannot be destined not to attain liberation. Liberation is entirely dependent on our will. If we are willing to surrender ourselves completely, liberation is here and now. Because we are not yet willing to surrender ourselves completely, we seem to be still in bondage. So liberation and bondage and liberation are determined only by our will, not by destiny. As Bhagavan said, another term for liberation is jnana. Bhagavan often used to say, bhakti is the mother of jnana. Bhakti means love. That is will. So it's by our love to surrender ourselves. If we love Bhagavan so much that we want to give ourselves entirely to him, that love is the true bhakti, and that is what will give rise to jnana, or that is what will remove the obstacles to experiencing jnana, because jnana is actually ever present. Jnana is our own real nature. That's one point. It's not a matter of our ripeness being imprinted in destiny. Destiny is tailor-made to suit our present level of spiritual development. So Bhagavan, who ordains the fruit of our past actions and decides what we are to experience in this lifetime, tailor-makes our destiny to suit our present level of spiritual development. That's how we should view it. So destiny is entirely is selected by Bhagavan according to our present spiritual needs. So, but the life of Venkataraman, what was that the destiny of Venkataraman was tailor-made to suit the spiritual development of the soul who was born as Venkataraman. We can say it that way. And then the last paragraph, I understand we need to be devoted to the direct path completely and leave the burdens of the illusory self to Bhagavan. Why carry the load on our head when traveling by train? But how is this put in practice in day-to-day life? This is clearly answered by Bhagavan when he gave this analogy. That is, he gave this analogy in the 13th paragraph of Nana. The analogy is in the last sentence of that paragraph. It is to illustrate what he said in the previous sentence. What he said in the previous sentence is, since one Parameshwara Shakti, supreme ruling power or power of God, is driving all karyas. Karyas means whatever needs to happen, whatever ought to happen or to be done. So since that one Parameshwara Shakti is driving all karyas, instead of we also yielding to it, why to be perpetually thinking it's necessary to do like this, it's necessary to do like that? So when Bhagavan says leaving the burden aside, he means leaving the burden of thinking aside. That is, as he said in the first sentence of this paragraph, he defined what is complete self-surrender. Chintane Tavira, Vera Chintane Kalambaru Satram Idum Kodamo. Not giving even the slightest room to the rising of any thought other than Atma-chintana, that means self-attentiveness, Anmanishta Paranai Irapate, thereby being Atmanishta Paran, one who is firmly established as oneself, Tanne Isanaku Alipadam, that alone is giving oneself to God. So not giving room to the rising of any thought, by being so keenly self-attentive that we thereby give no room to the rising of any thought, is what Bhagavan means by self-surrender. That is how we can surrender ourselves completely. And then in the next sentence he says, even though one places whatever amount of burden upon God, that entire amount he will bear. So we can give God the entire burden of our thinking. We don't have to think anything. All we have to do is to give ourselves to God. He will take care of everything else. So since that one Parameshwara Shakti is driving all karyas, instead of yielding to it, why should we be perpetually thinking it's necessary to do like this, it's necessary to do like that? If we continue thinking, oh, do I need to do this or do I need to do that? Now I'm faced with a difficult decision. What do I decide this or do I decide that? So long as we are thinking like that, we are carrying our burden on our head. But we are traveling on the trains, Bhagavan says. So you don't have to carry your burden on your head. You don't have the burden of thinking, you can leave entirely to God. So why we are not able to do so? Because we still have strong desires and attachments. So we're unwilling to let go of this burden of thinking. If we had true love for Bhagavan, really deep love for Bhagavan, and complete trust in him, we would leave even the burden of thinking to him. We would do as he says, cling firmly to self-attentiveness and give no room to the rising of any other thoughts. If we did so, then he will carry all the burden of our thinking. So that is how we are to put it into practice in day-to-day life. However, because we still have desires and attachments, we are not able to surrender ourselves so completely. But slowly, gradually, we need to wean our mind away from its liking to go outwards and think about other things and think I've got important decisions. Do I decide this? Do I decide that? Ippadisaya vendum, appadisaya vendum, as Bhagavan said. Why should we be thinking that? Leave it to him. So slowly, we need to wean our mind away from this habit of thinking, but everything depends on us. Everything will go on smoothly according to destiny, whether we think about it or not. That is what Bhagavan teaches us. Ash, I hope that answers your questions adequately. if anyone has any questions to ask about what I've explained, please do so, or I'll go on to the next question. Ash, was that an adequate answer to your questions?
Yes, Michael, that was pretty clear. Thank you very much. I'll have to revisit the recording again and hopefully understand it more deeply. I think the issue is that the key thing is to be self-attentive, because by doing that you basically get into the state of self-surrender. But it's not easy to do, even though you want to keep yourself totally to be consumed by Bhagavan, by God.
According to Bhagavan, it is easy. There's nothing easier than that. It's extremely easy. Why it seems difficult is because of our unwillingness to let go. We think of so many other things. Why can we not think of ourselves? In other words, attend to ourselves. Attending to ourselves, it has to be easier than attending to any other thing. To attend to any other thing, our attention needs to go away from ourselves towards other things. To attend to ourselves, it just needs to rest in its source. So self-attentiveness is a state of complete rest. It seems to be difficult because of our desires and attachment, because we are so eagerly, enthusiastically going outwards. So it's actually very easy. It seems difficult because we're unwilling to let go. So that is why we have to slowly wean our mind away off its desires and attachments. We need to become, we need to, by constantly trying to turn our attention back within, we need to weaken the Vishaya vasanas, our outgoing desires and attachments, and learn to be satisfied just to rest in ourselves.
So the key is trying to be self-attentive all the time. So by doing that you will generally break away from all the outwardly desires, and the desire to focus in will increase, and it'll come to a point where it's 100%, and that's the end, and you achieve Mananasa.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Okay. So I'll now go on to the next question, which is from Sanjay. Sanjay had written, Bhagavan teaches us in paragraph 16 of Nana, Atma-vichara means keeping the mind in or on self. I was wondering if other ancient Vedantic texts or Adi Shankara or other sages have ever described Atma-vichara in such clear terms. I believe Sri Adi Shankara says in verse 11 of Vivekachudamani, karma, action, is only for chitta suddhi, purification of mind, but not for vastu upalabdhi, acquisition or knowledge of vastu, the reality. Vastu siddhi, attainment of reality, is only by vichara and not in the least by karma kodi, tens of millions of actions. Adi Shankara says vastu siddhi, attainment of reality, is only by vichara and not by karma kodi. Though this is in perfect accord with Bhagavan's teachings, did Shankara describe what vichara is? One may easily take vichara to mean studying and thinking deeply about all the Vedantic texts and their commentaries and so on. Okay, yes, it is true. But many scholars of Advaita, scholars means many of them are sannyasis and maybe heads of mats or so on. They take vichara to mean studying the Vedantic texts and the commentaries on them, and thereby they think that is the means to attain direct experience of reality. Bhagavan has clearly repudiated that idea in the paragraph, the 15th paragraph of Nana, when he says, not 15, sorry, which paragraph is it? Yes, in that same 16th paragraph, he says, since in every text it is said that for attaining mukti, it is necessary to make the mind cease. After knowing that restraint of mind alone is the ultimate intention of such texts, there is no benefit to be gained by studying texts without limit. For making the mind cease, it is necessary to investigate oneself to see who one actually is. But instead of doing so, how can one see oneself by investigating in texts? Is it necessary to know? It is necessary to know oneself by one's own eye of jnana. Does a person called Raman need a mirror to know himself as Raman? Oneself is within the Panchakosa, the five sheaths, whereas texts are outside them. Therefore, investigating in texts in order to know oneself, whom it is necessary to investigate, setting aside all the five sheaths, is useless. Bhagavan says very strongly that it is useless. So what the textual inquiry, the textual investigation, the study of the text, which is taught as the means by many scholars and heads of Advaitic mats, according to Bhagavan, it's useless. Then in the next sentence he says, investigating who is oneself who is in bondage, knowing one's yathartha swarupa, one's own actual nature, alone is mukti. And then comes the sentence you referred to. The name Atma-vichara refers only to the practice of always keeping the mind on oneself. Whereas dhyana is imagining oneself to be Satchidananda Brahman. That is, a lot of people who think they can get jnana from studying text, they think they have to read the text and then they have to think very deeply. Yes, I am Brahman, I am Satchidananda, I am pure awareness. But thinking like that is not going to just if well, one analogy is given. If a prince is brought up by some peasants, and when he grows up to a certain age, is told you are the prince, you are the rightful king of the kingdom, he doesn't become the king just by saying, I am the king, I am the king. He has to go and fight and assert his right to the throne. That's an analogy that is sometimes given. We have to turn within and investigate ourselves. Merely thinking I am Brahman or I am pure awareness doesn't enable us to experience ourselves as such. We can experience ourselves as such only by turning our attention within and fixing our mind wholly on ourselves. So the question is whether this is clearly described in ancient texts. Well, I'm not an authority on. I mean, I have a very limited knowledge of ancient texts, so I'm not qualified to answer this. But I would say if it had been clearly explained that vichara, as Bhagavan has explained it here, that vichara means turning the mind within and fixing it on oneself, then all the scholars of Advaita who teach what vichara means to investigate and study the text would not interpret it in that way, because their own text would tell them, no, that is not vichara. So I suspect it hasn't been explained so clearly elsewhere. However, though it's not referred to as vichara, the practice that Bhagavan taught us has been was very clearly expressed by Krishna in two verses in the Bhagavad Gita. That's in chapter 6, verses 25 and 26. Bhagavan has translated these two verses in his Bhagavad Gita Saram, which is a selection of 42 verses from the Bhagavad Gita. And in those two verses, which Bhagavan, he selected them from Sanskrit and he translated them into Tamil. In the meaning of his Tamil translation of these two verses, the first one, verse 27 of Bhagavad Gita Saram, which is verse 25 of chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita, means it is necessary by a courage-imbued intellect to gently, or gradually, calmly, gradually, make the mind achieve motionlessness. Great charioteer, fix the mind, your attention, in or on Atman, yourself. Do not think even in the least of anything else. The term, but translated here is gently, gently, or calmly, calmly, gradually, gradually. In the original Sanskrit, it is sane, sane. In Tamil, Bhagavan translated that as mella, mella. In both cases, sane or mella means gently, calmly, gradually, little by little. So sane, sane, mella, mella means slowly, slowly. We've got to slowly, slowly wean our mind away from its habit of going outwards and turn it within to achieve motionlessness. And how do we achieve motionlessness? In the Sanskrit verse, it said, Atma samstam manakritva, making the mind fixed in oneself. In Tamil, Bhagavan says, Chittate Atma vilse tiduka. That means more or less the same. That is, fix the mind here means the attention, or no, in Atman, oneself. So fixing our attention on ourselves, that is the practice that Bhagavan has taught us. That is what Krishna is teaching here. And it ends with, in Tamil, Bhagavan says, Matsedavam ittanayam ennidade. Do not think even in the slightest of anything else. In Sanskrit, I think it's nakinchitabi api chintayet. Do not think of anything whatsoever else. So we have to fix our whole attention only on ourselves and thereby withdraw it from all other things. And then the next verse is also very important, because this is not something we can just achieve overnight. Slow and patient practice is necessary, as is implied in the next sentence. Whatever the mind, which is always wandering about without any steadiness, grasps, and wherever it consequently wanders, drawing that mind back from that and fixing it on oneself, make it always steady. So however many times our attention wanders away towards other things, we have to draw it back and fix it on ourselves. And that's how we achieve the steadiness that he said in the first sentence of the previous verse, make the mind achieve motionlessness. So the practice of Atma-vichara is very, very clearly described by Krishna in these two verses in Bhagavad Gita. So it is there in the ancient text, but people don't, but many of the scholars don't understand that this is what is meant by the term vichara. But there's also a clue in that verse of Vivekachanamani that you referred to, verse 11. Krishna says that the vastu siddhi, attainment of the reality, or the real substance, is only by vichara and not in the least by any cause of karma. From this we have to understand vichara is not a karma, it's not an action. Here action can be interpreted in two ways. One way is to interpret it as ritualistic action, which is one way we can interpret it, but that's a rather limited way. Karma actually means all action. So action of any kind whatsoever will not enable us to achieve vastu siddhi. Only by vichara. What does that imply? That implies vichara is not a karma, it is not an action. So studying texts, reading books, listening to lectures, that is an action. Vichara, so long as our attention goes away from ourselves, that is an action. If vichara is turning our attention back towards ourselves, when our attention turns back towards ourselves, that is not an action, that is the cessation of all actions. Because actions are done by ego. So first ego must rise and then act. When we turn our attention back towards ourselves, ego begins to subside. So vichara is the cessation of action, not an act. It is not an action. That is why it is the key to liberation, key to attaining vastu siddhi. Sanjay, does that adequately answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any further question in that connection, or shall I go into
not yet.
Okay, because the next
Yeah.
two emails are also ones from you, so I'll go on to the next one now.
Yes, sir.
Um, in the next email you say, but Bhagavan is enabling you to discuss Bhagavan's teachings with a friend called Saravana Bhavan, who's in New Zealand. Today, he explained that it is said in the scriptures that we need three things to know God. And these are a human birth, an intense desire for liberation, and a competent guru to guide us on this journey. He said we are fortunate to have all three. I told him that such things are written in scriptures, but Bhagavan didn't consider human birth to be anything special. Obviously, the other two criteria are important. That is, we need an intense desire for liberation and a real Sadguru to guide us back home. I gave him the example of cow Lakshmi attaining liberation, being in the cow body. So our human body is not a must for liberation. I told him that the human body is different from other types of animal body only because we have a superior intellect. But such an evolved intellect is a two-way sword. It can help us by showing us the correct path to liberation, and it can also lead us astray if it acts like Brahma flying high and high in search of the peak of anomaly. So the intellect more often than not becomes a hindrance. My friend was not fully satisfied with my answer. If you consider fit, could you please give your views on our discussion and give your opinion on this matter? I don't think it's correct to say Bhagavan didn't consider human birth to be anything special. Generally, it is said that human birth is something special. That doesn't mean that it's absolutely necessary. But in the case of Lakshmi, that is a very rare exception. There may be other exceptions like that, but generally it is said the human birth is the birth that is most favorable for attaining liberation. Because Lakshmi was probably had a human birth prior to her birth as Lakshmi, and she was born as a cow because of her love for Bhagavan. Many devotees believe, and Bhagavan never confirmed, but Bhagavan often, when he talks about Lakshmi, he would also talk about Kirepati. Kirepati was an old lady who used to wander over the hill collecting kire. Kire means spinach and other edible greens. And she used to cook those greens for Bhagavan and serve Bhagavan. And she had great love for Bhagavan. And after she passed away, shortly after she passed away, Lakshmi was born. And because Bhagavan often, when talking about Lakshmi, also talked about Kirepati, many devotees believe that Lakshmi was Kirepati returned as a cow to continue her devotion to Bhagavan. And there was a very, very strong link a bond of love between Bhagavan and Lakshmi. Bhagavan was totally impartial in his love. He showed equal love for all. But somehow everyone felt there was a special bond between Bhagavan and Lakshmi. And some remarkable things. For example, every year, for several years in a row, on Bhagavan's Jayanti, the day that Bhagavan's Jayanti was celebrated, Lakshmi would give birth to a calf. Some people may say that's miraculous. Some people may say it's just a coincidence. But it's significant because it shows the strong, the close connection between Lakshmi and Bhagavan. So Lakshmi is a very, very rare exception. Generally speaking, it is said that a human body is very favorable for attaining liberation. There are different explanations given for this. One of the explanations is that in a human birth, we can clearly distinguish three states: waking, dream, and sleep. Whereas in animal birth, animals cannot distinguish waking from dream. For them, when they wake up from a dream and into this present waking state, it seems to them to be a continuation of the same state. But whereas we are able to distinguish, oh, that was a different state, this is a different state. Though according to Bhagavan, this is also a dream, we're able to distinguish that was a different dream, this is a different dream. So that's about animals. About the so-called higher beings, the devas, the dweller, those who are dwelling in higher worlds, in heaven or wherever, it is said the devas never experience sleep. They're in a state of perpetual waking. Actually, waking means a dream. Perpetually they're dreaming. So because they don't experience sleep, they are not able to distinguish as we can, but we exist and are aware of our existence even when we are not aware of the body and world. So that is why the human birth is said to be superior. That is one explanation that is given. But we don't have to be too concerned about all these things. Obviously, it is necessary to have desire for liberation. It's also, for the vast majority of us, having a guru in human form is also necessary. In the case of Bhagavan, his guru was Arunachala. So Bhagavan never had a guru in human form, but Arunachala, because Bhagavan was able to understand the silent teaching of Arunachala, even from afar, even without coming to Arunachala, Arunachala worked within his mind and turned his attention within at the time of that fear of death. So Arunachala did its work even before Bhagavan had ever seen the physical form of Arunachala. So, but that again is an exception. For most of us, we need we need guru in human form. That is because our attention is going outwards. So guru has to appear to tell us what you're seeking. It doesn't exist outside. It exists within you. You are that. So the guru in human form is necessary for most of us. The human birth, well, let's not worry about that. We've all got human birth now. So, but the reason one of the reasons why it is stressed the importance of a human birth is we shouldn't waste the opportunity we have now. Whether human birth is superior or not, let us not be concerned about that. Now we have a human birth. Now every moment we have is a precious opportunity for us to turn our attention within. That is what is most important. So, and regarding what you said about the intellect, yes, the intellect, if we allow our intellect to go outwards, to do an Atma-vichara, to investigate the world, loka-vichara, to investigate anything other than ourselves, that is a misuse of our intellect. Intellect means that power of judgment and discrimination. If we've got a clear power of judgment, a clear power of viveka, we will know the correct use of our intellect is not to investigate things outward, other than ourselves, to investigate ourselves alone. So I hope this answer satisfies both you and Saravana Bhavan.
It satisfies me at least, sir. I don't know about Saravana Bhavan. Satisfies me. Thank you.
Okay, right. Oh, Saravana Bhavan, do you have any question about that?
Vanakkam, Michael ji. Yes, because you are put in a difficult situation this time because we had to look for anything related with the previous person. I'm looking for only thing. I got some message from Sanjay today. Then I have got a new things I need a clarification.
Okay.
It is about a Bhagavan love. So I have to ask in two questions here. What is Bhagavan love? The love in Ramana Maharshi's mother tongue, there are different ways we can say that. The love is common in English for everything, but in Tamil, you can say bhakti. Bhakti for the God or Guru, or anbu for the family, sibling, children, you can say anbu. And for kadal even for God or even for the opposite, male or female, different way we can present. So first question is, what is the main meaning of Bhagavan love?
You mean our love for Bhagavan or Bhagavan's love for us?
On that. Sorry?
Do you, when you say Bhagavan's love, you mean Bhagavan's love for us, not our love for Bhagavan?
Yes, yes. What is Bhagavan love for us?
Okay. Regarding the terms you use, bhakti, obviously, we can't say Bhagavan has bhakti for us. But bhakti is the devotion of the devotee for God. Bhagavan has used the word ambu frequently in Arunachal Stuti Panchakam. He's also used the word kadal in verse 7 of Arunachal Nabhamani Malai. En nammeduvo adusevai, kanneyundran karalineo, kadal peruke taruvaye. Oh beloved, do whatever you want, only give me ever increasing love for your 2 feet. So I don't think we have to, we all know what love is. Another term for love is priyam. Bhagavan has said in the first paragraph of Nana, what he says there about he says Sakala Jivagalam Dukamembadindri Epodum Sukamai Iraka Virambadalam. Since all sentient beings want or like to be happy without what is called misery, to be always happy without what is called misery, Yavakum tan iditilaye parama priyam iripadalam. There he uses the word priyam. Since for everyone the greatest love is only for oneself, priyataku sukame karama adalalam. Since happiness alone is the cause for love. So I think distinguishing different types of love is what is important is what is not the name we give to love, but what it is we love. Do we love, so long as we love the things of the world, we call that desire. When we love to turn within and surrender ourselves wholly to Bhagavan, that is true love. That is true bhakti. That is the highest, that is the greatest, the truest form of priyam, because that is love for oneself as one actually is.
Okay, the second question is most important, because now we are self-investigating to get to know what we are really, what we are. So in that case, we have to have love in all other living beings. So in that point, what sort of love we have to provide? I thought it may be helping or whatever, to do good things, charity, whatever in aspect. That's what I thought is a love. So what is happening now? We are not reached the Bhagavan state. So have you wait until we get to that stage to provide the love to other beings, or we have to start it even now? That is the thing I thought. But what is happening? The other egos or other people try to misuse that love, overuse or misuse, or they are self-centric and they are not even considering. So whether we have to withdraw from those people and get to the self-realization, then only we can use it, or even we have to use it. That is something little difficult for me to. So I have discussed with Sanjay today about that.
Okay. What you're talking about is not love, but the expression of love. Actions are not love. Actions are maybe expressions of love. What is important is if we want to do good in the world, we have to be good. Bhagavan has, in the last paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan says, it talks about what is goodness. He says, Evelo kevelo tandu nadikiromo avelo kavelo nammayundu. That means to whatever extent, sinking low, subsiding or being humble, we proceed or conduct ourselves, to that extent there is goodness. So if we want to do good in the world, the greatest good we can do is by trying to turn our attention within and thereby subsiding back into our source. Instead of that, if we rise as ego saying, I am going to do good in this world, I am going to help this person, I'm going to help that person, we face all sorts of difficulties. The greatest love is to surrender ourselves completely to Bhagavan. If we surrender ourselves completely to Bhagavan, then we can leave it to him to take care of the world. He knows how to take care of the world better than we do. So we should not be concerned about the world. In the previous paragraph, the 19th paragraph, Bhagavan says, Sadhyamana Varayil, Anya Karya. No, before that, he says, Prapanja Vishayangalil, Adikamai Manate Vidakudadu, Sadhyamana Varayil, Anya Karya Til, Pravesika Kudadu. That means it is not appropriate to let one's mind dwell excessively on worldly matters. To the extent possible, it is not appropriate to intrude in others' affairs. So the work that has been given to us by Bhagavan is to turn within and thereby surrender ourselves completely. We, of course, when we rise as ego, we interact with the world, and then there are problems, and we, in an ordinary sense, when we are faced with problems, we try to help other people to the extent we can, but we shouldn't think that we can, even when we want to help others, we can't help those who are not willing to be helped. And what we think is good for others, they may not think is good for them. So helping others or trying to do good to others is a very, very, it's a minefield. We're walking through a minefield. So it is best to follow the path that Bhagavan has taught us, which is devoting our attention to turning within and trying to know ourselves, thereby surrendering ourselves completely. This is not being selfish or irresponsible. This is leaving the entire burden to Bhagavan, who knows how to solve the problems of the world much better than we do. And what happens to the problems of the world? Problems come and go. Every problem has its own solution within it. And what was a problem last year is no longer a problem this year. And what is a problem now, we'll have forgotten about in a year's time. So the world is ever changing. What is the one thing that is constant, the one thing that is real in this ever changing and unreal world is I am. That is what we should cling to. That is what we should be concerned about.
Yes, thank you very much. It's clear to me now what I can understand. First of all, we have to love what is our real nature. That
exactly.
Is
well, love what is real in you is real in everything else. So if you love what is real in you, you're loving what is real in everyone else. That's why compassion and is there anyone who has lived such a kind and loving and compassionate life as Bhagavan? When he accidentally disturbed a hornet's nest, he stood there and let the hornet sting his thigh because he felt repentant. Though it was an accident, he had disturbed them. So he felt, okay, they're justified in being angry with this thigh. Let them sting it. So that is the true love. Because Bhagavan loves this is coming back to your first question, Bhagavan's love. Bhagavan doesn't love any of us as something other than himself, because he doesn't see us as other than himself. He sees, in Bhagavan's view, he alone exists. So he sees everything as himself. Because he sees us as himself, he loves us as himself. So that is the highest love of all. That is the love that we are seeking on this path. That is the love that Bhagavan referred to in verse 101 of Arunachala Aksharamulai. Ambu vilalipol, ambu ruvanilene, anvaikaritara Arunachala. Like ice in water, melt me as love in you, the form of love. Arunachala is the form of love. Arunachala and Bhagavan are one and the same. Bhagavan is Arunachala, Arunachala is Bhagavan. They have a form of love because in their view, there is nothing other than themselves. So they love everything as themselves. So the problem lies in our seeing ourselves as something separate from them. Just like an iceberg seems to be separate from the ocean, but actually it is nothing but ocean, it's nothing but water. So we have to melt back and lose ourselves entirely in him. That is true love.
Thank you very much.
The next question I was asked by email is again from Sanjay. What he said is, while explaining Bhagavan's death experience, you often say that when young Venkataraman had that intense fear of death, he feared to lose his own existence and did not fear to lose anything else. That is, as a boy of 16, when he had that intense fear of death, he clung to himself with so much intensity only because he was only concerned about losing his existence. All his other desires and attachments were like a thin veil, and therefore those vasanas were not a hindrance to his clinging to himself. My question is, what do you mean by he feared to lose his existence? Since he experienced himself as Venkataraman at that moment, did he fear to lose his existence as Venkataraman, or did he fear to lose his pure existence, I am? I would be grateful if you could clarify this. Think about what, well, we don't know exactly what Bhagavan said, but what's been recorded about what Bhagavan has said about his death experience. He said that when the fear of death came, he clarified that it didn't exactly happen in thoughts. It all happened in a flash, but as he describes it in terms of thought, he thought, now this body is dead. With the death of this body, am I also, will I also die? That is what he feared is, well, what he wanted to know is, when the body dies, will I also die? So he clearly understood the distinction between his body and himself. So he had already decided the body is dead, so Venkataraman is dead. But with the death of Venkataraman, this body, am I also going to die? So when I said that Bhagavan feared to lose his existence, his existence as Venkataraman was not his real existence. That was only a seeming existence. His real existence, the real existence of all of us, is the pure awareness I am. So that is what Bhagavan, that is what Bhagavan feared to lose, and that is what he clung to. The context in which I said I sometimes explain this is normally when people get a fear of death, they begin to think about whatever is most dear to them. So they begin to think about their family, their job, their status in society, whatever it is. Those things that are important to them, those things their mind clings to. So, whereas in the case of Bhagavan, he wasn't attached to anything external to himself. So when the fear of death came, he turned his attention within and clung to himself alone. That is, he turned his attention back towards himself. So, yeah, it wasn't his existence of Venkataraman that he was concerned about. He'd already decided Venkataraman is dead. He feared when Venkataraman dies, will I also die? Because if I am Venkataraman, then I will die when Venkataraman dies. But he had already understood there's a clear distinction between I and Venkataraman. So when Venkataraman dies, when the body dies, what happens to this I? That is what he sought to find out, and that's what he found out. But what is shining in each and every one of us as I is the eternal reality. That alone is what is always real, ever unchanging. eternal, unchanging, and self-shining, as he often defined it. That is his definition of reality. What is eternal, unchanging, and self-shining? What is eternal is only I. What is ever unchanging is only I. All other things change, but I alone remains unchanged. So that is what he clung to, and that is what he realized the true nature. Yeah. Is that an adequate answer to your question, Sanjay?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so there's some more questions. Ash, you have your hand raised. Do you want to ask something?
Yes, Michael, it's a related question. So I have read, as in case of Bhagavan, at the point just before Maranasa, there is immense fear of ego death. I'm concerned that when we get to that point, we will turn back and not go through with it to end it all. How can we make sure we do not let fear hold us back at that stage?
Fear is so long as there is desire, there will be fear. So fear and desire are inseparable. If you desire life, you fear death. So it's like that with everything. If you desire to be very rich, you will fear to lose all your money. So fear is just the fear is inseparable from desire. So long as we have desires and attachments, we will not be willing to surrender ourselves. Only when our desires and attachments have been reduced considerably, and when our love just to be as we actually are is overwhelmed that all our other desires and attachments, will we be finally willing to surrender. So even now, it is fear that is holding us back. Why don't we let? We could experience our real nature here and now, if we were willing to let go of everything else. But because we've got desire for everything else, we fear to let go of everything else. So even now, it's fear, but call it fear or call it desire. It amounts to the same thing. That is what is holding us back. That is what, by practicing self-investigation, by repeatedly trying to turn our attention back within, we are slowly weakening our desires and attachments and strengthening our love to know ourselves. So eventually, if we follow this path, as Bhagavan taught us, with due perseverance and diligence, we will certainly reach a point where we will be willing to surrender ourselves completely. So we don't have to be concerned about, will fear hold me back? When we're ready, fear won't hold us back. When the fruit is ripe, it drops from the tree.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, that there is a whole lot of fear. The fear that you don't want to come back again, and you want to make sure this is your final lifetime. So I agree. Yeah, that by continuously practicing and self-surrendering, it'll be easy. And I think grace also plays a big role in it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Even fearing to come back again. Why should we fear to come? If we were wise, we would fear to continue existing as an ego even now. Why think about the problems we may experience in the future if we come back again? Being here now as ego is a problem. That is what we should tackle. Because so long as we want to be here now as ego, we will want to come back again and again and again. So the surrender cannot be in the future. Surrender has to be here and now.
Very true, Michael. Very true. Very true.
Only in the present moment that we can do the sadhana. So we shouldn't be thinking about, do I have to take rebirth, or how many rebirths will I have? That's all an Atma-vichara. That's turning our attention away from ourselves. We need to turn our attention back towards ourselves. Who am I here and now? Not who will I be in the future, or who was I in the past? Who am I here and now? It's only in the present moment that we can experience what we actually are.
That's true, Michael. That's true, because the fear of coming back also is a very strong desire to make sure you get it done this time.
Yeah, well, okay, that's good. That's good. If that motivates you, that's very good. But don't think about the future. Think about the present. That's the solution.
Thank you, Michael.
So I'll go on to the next email question and then answer another question of someone who has a hand raised. The next email question is from Krishna Kumar. He said, thanks a lot for your reply for my questions on Prarabdha. My question for now is on reincarnation. I had read in talks that a boy around 10 years could recollect his past life and expressed interest to meet his then family members. When inquiry was made in this regard, they found out that the person with whom this boy had identified as in his past life incarnation died around a year back. I want to know whether such things can really happen. If yes, can you please explain how it can happen, as we all live in the same planet and follow the same time system? I checked on this. This is a reference to, in talks, section 261 on page 225. I'll just get that passage. That's talk number 261. What is said there is, there was a reference to reincarnation. Reincarnation of Shanti Devi tallies with the human standards of time. Shanti Devi, sometimes there were news came in those days, sometimes news came in newspapers about cases where someone remembered their past life or something. So Shanti Devi is one such example. So what is said in talks is, whereas the latest case reported of a boy of 7 is different. The boy is 7 years now. He recalls his past births. Inquiries go to show that the previous body was given up 10 months ago. The question arises how the matter stood for 6 years and 2 months previous to the death of the former body. Did the soul occupy 2 bodies at the same time? Sri Bhagavan pointed out that the 7 years is according to the boy, 10 months according to the observer. The difference is due to these 2 upadhis. The boy's experience extending to 7 years has been calculated by the observer to covering only 10 months of his own time. Bhagavan again referred to Leela's story in Yoga Vashishta. I think this is not actually very clearly recorded, because what is meant by the observer? What Bhagavan actually said is, in every state has its own time scale. That is, sometimes we may according to the waking state, we may doze off just for a few moments, but we may dream, and our dream may seem to have a long duration, but because in each state has its own standard of time, so we cannot measure the duration of a dream in terms of waking duration or vice versa. Likewise, every life is just a dream. So the dream, in the previous dream, the person, the boy seemed to remembered himself as in the previous dream, had passed away 10 months before this. This was in, I don't know what they would be given, this may have been, say, 1936, just for example. Whereas the boy was born in 1929. That is because this is a different dream, that is a different dream. We can't compare the standards of 2 different dreams. Time has no existence outside our mind. The world also has no existence outside our mind. The world, now we experience one world, in dream we experience another world. So the world we experienced in a previous life is the world of another dream. So that world and its time scale, we cannot measure by in terms of the time scale in our present dream. What Bhagavan actually said about this is, This shows the unreality of time. Bhagavan referred to this story as illustrating the fact that time is entirely in the mind. Time has no objective existence, just like the world is entirely in the mind. Nothing actually has any objective existence. It's all only, everything is only within the mind, according to Bhagavan. Does that adequately answer your question, Krishna Kumar, if you're there? Maybe he's not here. Okay. Rati, you have your hand raised. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, Michael. First, I'd like to say thank you so much for these wonderful discussions. It's just absolutely wonderful. It almost feels like Bhagavan is talking to us directly, you know. But my question, my thing here is that, you know, these past impressions, the vasanas, how does one really reduce them or make them lessen their impact? And also, how does one live with more dispassion or vairagya? How can one achieve that? You know, I know possibly it's surrender, but I mean, how does, what are some easier methods to do that?
Okay, but the vasanas that we need to be concerned about are our Vishaya vasanas. Vishaya means phenomena. So our liking to experience phenomena, that's things other than ourselves. These are what draw our mind outwards. So long as we are giving our mind free rein to follow its vasanas, to go outwards, to wander about under the sway of its vasanas, they are persisting. But when we are following the path of self-investigation and self-surrender, we are trying to turn our mind within. Every time we try to turn our mind within, we are thereby weakening our Vishaya vasanas and strengthening our Sattvasana. Sattvasana means the liking or the inclination just to be as we actually are. That is, at every moment we have a choice, either to attend to other things or to attend to ourselves. So long as we allow our mind to continue attending to other things, we are sustaining the Vishaya vasanas. Every time we turn our attention, we decide to turn our attention back towards ourselves, we are thereby weakening that Vishaya, or the Vishaya vasanas collectively are getting weakened and the Sattvasana is increasing. To the extent that the Vishaya vasanas are weakened, the state in which Vishaya vasanas are weakened is the state of vairagya. Vairagya simply means the freedom from raga, from the passion, from the desire. That means freedom from the vasanas. So how to free our mind from it, that has been very clearly explained by Bhagavan in the 10th and 11th paragraphs of Nana. What he says in the 10th paragraph, even though Vishaya vasanas, which come from time immemorial, rise in countless numbers like ocean waves, they will all be destroyed when Swarupa Dhyana increases and increases. Swarupa Dhyana literally means meditation or contemplation on one's real nature. That means self-attentiveness. Vasanas rise how? They rise in the form of thoughts or phenomena. That's all that we perceive is just a manifestation of our Vishaya vasanas. But when when the Swarupa Dhyana increases and increases, he says, Kalamba Kalamba, that means it rises and rises. What he means by increases and increases is in its depth and intensity. So the more keenly we turn our attention within, the more the Vishaya vasanas will be weakened and eventually destroyed. And then in the next sentence he says, without giving room even to a doubting thought, so many vasanas ceasing or being dissolved, is it possible to be only a Swarupa, my own real nature? It is necessary to cling tenaciously to self-attentiveness. That is, if we cling firmly to self-attentiveness, the vasanas will get weakened. We shouldn't give, if we allow the doubting thought to rise, is it possible to put an end to all these vasanas and to remain as myself? We're thinking of the Vishaya vasanas. We're allowing our attention to go away from ourselves. We shouldn't even give room to that thought. We should cling to ourselves so keenly, as he describes in the first sentence of the 13th paragraph when describing what is self-surrender. Anma chintane tabiro vericitane kalamadu satum idum kadamo. That is, we need to attend to ourselves so keenly, but we give not even the slightest room to the rising of any other thought. In Tamil, I don't know if you know Tamil, but he says very, very strongly here. What I translate is, it's necessary to cling tenaciously to self-attentiveness. He says in Tamil, Swarupa dhyanate vida pidiyai pidikavendam. Vida means not leaving. Pidiyai means clinging, and pidika means to cling clingingly without leaving. It's an idiomatic way of saying it in Tamil, but very, very strong. We have to cling tenaciously. So firmly we have to cling to self-attentiveness. Then in the next sentence he says, however great a sinner one may be, instead of lamenting and weeping, I'm a sinner, how can I be saved? If one completely gives up the thought that one is a sinner and is zealous or steadfast in self-attentiveness, one will certainly be reformed. So Bhagavan gives an assurance here. All that is required is for us to cling firmly to self-attentiveness. Everything else will be taken care of. There are past sins or past bad actions. We need not be concerned about them. Who am I now, here and now? Cling to yourself. That's all that's required. And then in the next paragraph, he says, as long as Vishaya vasanas exist within the mind, so long is the investigation, who am I, necessary. As and when thoughts appear, then and there it is necessary to annihilate them all by vicharana in the very place from which they arise. By clinging firmly to self-attentiveness, we will be destroying the Vishaya vasanas as and when they arise in the form of thoughts. And then in the next sentence, he defines what is vairagya. Not attending to anything other than oneself, not attending to anything other. Anya means, it means not other. It implies not other than oneself. So not attending to anything other than oneself is vairagya or nirasa. Vairagya means dispassion or detachment. Nirasa means desirelessness. They both mean more or less the same. And then in the next sentence he says, not leaving oneself is jnana. In truth, these two, vairagya and jnana, are one and the same. So clinging firmly to ourselves and thereby not attending to anything else, that is vairagya and that is also jnana. And the importance of vairagya is illustrated by Bhagavan by using an analogy in the next sentence. Just as pearl divers tying stones to their waist and sinking pick up pearls that are found at the bottom of the ocean, so each one sinking within himself, within oneself, with vairagya. That is, he's comparing vairagya to the stone that pearl divers tied to their waist. With vairagya, may attain the pearl of oneself, the Atma-vichara, the pearl of our real nature, it means. It is by vairagya, but it's only with that stone of vairagya that we're able to sink deep enough into ourselves to attain, to experience our real nature, the implication. So what is that vairagya? It's the not attending to anything other than ourselves. So we need to attend to ourselves so keenly that we give no room to the rising of any thought about anything other than ourselves. And then he gives another analogy in the next sentence. So long as enemies are within the fort, they will be continuously coming out from it. What are the enemies he's referring to? The Vishaya vasanas. And the fort is the fort of our own heart. And then in the final sentence, he says, if one is continuously cutting down or destroying all of them, as and when they come, the fort will eventually be captured. So how do we cut them down? By clinging firmly to self-attentiveness, the swarupa dhyana, Atma-vichara. So that's how we cultivate vairagya, that's how we destroy the vasanas, and how eventually we eradicate the root of the vasanas, which is ego. Does that adequately answer your question?
Yes, completely. Thank you so much, Michael.
Right.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I'll go on to another question. This is a question by Sue Mitchell.
I think Karen Bull was next. I think.
No, but I'm alternating.
Oh, okay, yeah.
What Sue Mitchell has written, I may have got this all in a muddle, so please read through first, and I can amend if it doesn't make any sense. She refers to Sanjay, who on an earlier occasion had spoken about some dispute in his family about land or property or something, and whether anyone's going to get more than their fair share. So what she says is, listening to a gentleman who had a dispute with his family over land made me think about how best to deal with injustice. I think these situations can feel unfair and a bitter pill, in the sense that one person gets the short end of the stick, while the person who is behaving in an underhand way seems to benefit. You don't want to retaliate, but it can be a challenge to still like the person when this happens and forget the injustice. This world is full of injustices, and most of us, even within our own family, we can see injustice. Some people get more than their fair share. This is just the way of the world. If we are following the spiritual path, we shouldn't attach importance to material things. What we are destined to get, we will get. What we are not destined to get, we will not get. So nobody can get more than what they are destined to get. As I think I mentioned Sanjay when answering his question, there's a nice proverb that is often repeated in Scotland. What's for you won't go by you. That means what you're destined to get, you cannot fail to get it. It will definitely come to you. And what you're not destined to get, you will not get. So if we're following Bhagavan's path, if we understand that everything is happening according to prarabdha, and prarabdha is the sweet will of Bhagavan, we don't have to be concerned about these things. Ultimately, what does it matter? If someone gets more than their fair share, how long will they be able to keep that? People spend their whole life seeking wealth, trying to accumulate property and whatever. But one day we have to leave all these things. So why should we struggle so much for these things? Why should we be concerned so much for these things? If we want to live a peaceful and happy life, we need to surrender ourselves and surrender all concern about things. Generally speaking, Bhagavan provides for us what we need. So long as we've got food, clothing, and shelter, what more do we need? So long as the basic needs of our life are provided, we shouldn't bother about other things. And if the basic necessities of bodily life are not provided, that is also our destiny. So we accept that also as Bhagavan's sweet will. So we shouldn't, the world is full of injustice. See, but some people who have, Jeff Bezos apparently has nearly 200 or 2,000 billion dollars. I mean, he's wealthier than hundreds of countries. But what's the use of all that wealth? He's still greedy. He's still exploiting the people who work in his warehouses and everything. Jeff Bezos is the owner of Amazon. So people, however much wealth they have, they are still not satisfied. So why should we hanker for wealth or any of these things? These are all trivial, insubstantial things.
Michael?
Yes.
So it wasn't so much about wealth. It was mainly, I suppose, more, say, like on a personal, like if you have someone
I
harms you on a personal level as opposed to...
We just have to accept people as they are. If we are not as greedy as our siblings, for example, we have to take that as a blessing. That is, by Bhagavan's grace, we were freed from that greediness. Take it that way. And let's feel sorry for our siblings for their greediness, if such is the case. I mean, or siblings or cousins or whoever it may be. I mean, in everyone's family, there are some people who are more, have a more avaricious, let's say. The avaricious people are not the happy ones. to the extent we are free of avariciousness, to that extent we are happy. So we have to feel sorry, feel pity for them. So we shouldn't, as Bhagavan said, however bad other people may appear to be, it is not proper to dislike them. Likes and dislikes are both to be disliked. That's what Bhagavan says in the 19th paragraph of Nana. So we must learn to love people in spite of all their shortcomings.
Okay.
Does that answer that question?
Yeah, because it wasn't so much about, like a property deal. It was more if someone's unkind, I suppose.
Yeah, well, that's human nature. We all, to a greater or lesser extent, are selfish. So long as we rise as ego, the seeds of selfishness are there in us. By Bhagavan's grace, we may seem to be a little bit less selfish than others, but the seeds of that selfishness are still within us. So let us focus on our getting rid of our own ego. We can't solve other people's problems, but we can solve our own problem by investigating ourselves and thereby surrendering this ego.
Right. Thank you.
But then the next part of your question was something about what the founder of the animal hospital had written. And I'll read what you had written, but I didn't understand it very clearly.
Oh, don't worry about it, because I've wrote enough of things, so just ignore that then. Don't worry.
Okay. But one thing I wanted to say about that, this idea about burning off karma, prarabdha karma, whatever is the prarabdha is what is selected by Bhagavan for our own good. We have to experience it for our own benefit. So it need not be burnt off. We just have to undergo it and learn the lessons from it, whatever it is, and to be unaffected by it, learn to be detached from it. Many people think that liberation is attained only when all your past karmas are burnt off. That's a belief, a very widespread belief. We will never burn off all the fruits of our past karmas because we've done so many. And as we are experiencing the fruit of past karmas, we are producing more fruit. So it will never be possible to burn off all karmas. Liberation is not is the destruction of ego. When ego is the root of all the three karmas, agamya, sanchita, and prarabdha. The doer of the agamya is ego. The fruits accumulated, the sanchita and the prarabdha, they are to be experienced by ego. So ego is the root of all these things. If ego is annihilated, all karma comes to an end. So it's we shouldn't think in terms of burning off karma. That's a very wrong idea. What we need to burn off is the root of karma, ourself as ego. That is what we need to get rid of.
I think what he was saying about the animals, though, is that they've got, obviously they've experienced really traumatic events,
yes,
and that he was burning off their suffering. And I didn't know whether that was the same, that when you're dealing with a challenging person, instead of taking it personally, you see it.
It is the prarabdha of those animals to have suffered, and it is also the prarabdha of those animals to be rescued by him. So it's all prarabdha. It's not, I cannot burn off your karma, you cannot burn off my karma.
Right, okay.
We have to experience what we are destined to experience. But people have so many beliefs. I mean, the law of karma has been taught very clearly by Bhagavan, but it's understood differently in so many different ways by people. There's so many different beliefs about karma. So what we need to learn about karma, what Bhagavan has taught us about karma, is to help us to be unconcerned about karma. The only thing that we need to be concerned about is knowing ourselves and thereby surrendering this ego. That's all we need to be concerned about.
Okay, so don't get hung up on it.
You're right. And then Karen, you had a question.
Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Hello, nice to meet you all. It's my first visit to Satsang, so thank you for allowing me to join you. I'm quite a new sadhaka. I've been on this journey for about 2 years, and I've read bits and pieces of Bhagavan and read a bit more of other teachers like Shankaracharya and things. I just wanted to ask you, Michael, what was the first text that you read?
The first text I read was Nana, that's Who Am I? I read an English translation of it. That's that's the hook with which Bhagavan caught me. Well, of course, we were always in under his, but in terms of the outward life, that's what, when I really, well, I mean, it was reading that made me understand, oh, this is the path for me. And this is, Bhagavan is my guru, so.
Yeah, thank you.
Bhagavan first revealed himself to me through that Nana, which I still think is one of, it's such a precious text. It is, Bhagavan has given us so much in that simple text.
Yeah.
So much help and guidance.
Yeah, thank you.
And when I first read it, I probably didn't even understand 1% of it, but the 1% I did understand, I mean, the tiny bit I did understand, is that what we need to know is, who am I? That is, what is the use of knowing anything else when we don't know what we ourselves actually are? That made so much sense to me. Since then, I've been hooked on Bhagavan's teachings.
Thank you.
And as time goes on, the love for his teachings just grows more and more and more, all by his grace.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. And I'll answer one more question from email, and then the next question is asked by Alex. He or she said, I read some books of some Ramana Maharshi books a while ago. I want to reconnect with his teachings. I want to find out which material is recommended to read to get the inner essence of his teaching. Also regarding self-inquiry, any tips about that? Well, this is closely connected to the question just asked. I think the first text to read, and the text to continue reading again and again and again, because there's so much deep meaning in it, is Nana, who am I? I think that's the you can say the foundational text of Bhagavan's teachings, and it's a spring that never ceases to give. I've been reading it for 45 years or something now, and I still I treasure every word of it. That's in many ways the most important text. The other thing are his other writings. I mean, that's the only major work he wrote in prose. Most of his other writings were in poetry. His original writings, texts like Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu and Upadesha, like Nana, in these texts, Bhagavan is laying down the, is explaining clearly the fundamental principles of his teachings. So these two texts are very important to read and understand. Arunachala Panchakam is also extremely important. That the Arunachala Panchakam means the 5 hymns to Arunachala, because Bhagavan, well, he both gives his teachings. I mean, his teachings are expressed in those works in so many ways, but he also makes it clear that this path is all about love. As Bhagavan often used to say, bhakti is the mother of jnana. We cannot even begin to investigate ourselves without love, without the required love and the willingness to begin to surrender ourselves. So Arunachala Panchakam is an extremely important set of works. And there are other small poems, like very important ones, like Atma-vichara, Ekamma-panchakam, such works are there. Some verses of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham. Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham is a bit of a mixture. Some of them are original verses of Bhagavan. Some are translations. Even among the translations, some are much more important than others. So it's quite a mixture there. There's another collection of verses that Bhagavan wrote from time to time called Upadeshatani Pāka. That's 27 verses, which are many of them were written as part of Guru Vachakavai, because sometimes when Murugan wrote verses, Bhagavan would sometimes condense the meaning of 2 verses into 1 verse, or to condense the meaning of a 4-line verse into a 2-line verse, or he would just re-express the same idea in his own words. So any verses of Guru Vachakavai written by Bhagavan but are not included in Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham or other main works are included in Upadeshatani Pāka. But there are also some verses of translations. But yeah, and Bhagavan didn't write a lot, but what he wrote is very, very rich and deep in meaning. So we can spend a lifetime studying. Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu just 40 verses, Upadeshatani just 30 verses, Nana just 20 paragraphs. We can know the whole thing by heart, but still continue to read it and think about it and find more and more depth in it. So these are the works. It is Bhagavan's own writings where we get the real inner essence of his teaching. There are other books in which people have recorded answers he gave to people's questions. They are useful, but there are 2 shortcomings to those type of books. Firstly, Bhagavan answers questions according to the needs of the questioner. So often he dilutes his teaching to suit the needs of particular questioners. So we can't take that all that he said in answer to people's questions are his core teachings. Secondly, the people who recorded those books, those collections of questions and answers, they recorded what they remembered, and they remembered what they understood. So it is not the exact words of Bhagavan. It's what someone remembers, understood and remembers of what Bhagavan said. So we can't take books like Talks and Day by Day and Maharshi's Gospel. We can't take such books to be entirely accurate records of Bhagavan's teachings, or even to the extent that they're accurate, but they're representing his core teachings. But they are nevertheless useful books. It's worth reading them, but we don't have to take everything that is said in them as Bhagavan's main teachings. Regarding self-inquiry, any tips? The practice of self-inquiry or self-investigation, as I think it's more accurate to translate it, is extremely simple. It is just turning our attention within to look at ourselves, metaphorically speaking. Obviously, we're not looking with our eye, with our power of attention, we look within ourselves to see what we actually are. Bhagavan has given many clues, but ultimately, he said the way cannot be shown by another. We each have to find the way into our own heart, into our own home. The clues are enough to start us on the path. The central clue is see yourself, attend to yourself, be self-attentive. That's the central clue. If we try to put that into practice, the more we put it into practice, the clearer the way will become. Because this is not just a meditation. This is a path of investigation. So when you're investigating something, the deeper you go in your investigation, the clearer the way will become. So also the deeper we go in this practice, the clearer the way will become. So how to learn to investigate ourselves? By investigating ourselves. Just like how to learn to ride a bicycle. You can read any number of books about learning to ride a bicycle, but you cannot learn to ride a bicycle without getting on a bicycle and trying and falling off many times. Likewise, on this path, we have to try try, and the way will become clearer and clearer. But it's also very important, before we even start this inquiry, to understand the basic principles of Bhagavan's teachings. Because firstly, we need to understand what we are not, but we need to understand why we are not this body, this mind, or any phenomenon. We are not any object. We are as ego, we are the subject. So we need to distinguish the perceiver from everything that is perceived. We are not anything that is perceived, we are the perceiver. But as the perceiver, we are aware of ourselves. So because we are aware of ourselves, we can be self-attentive. So why it's important to understand this? If we don't understand this, if I don't understand that I'm not this body, then I don't think attending to this body is attending to myself. Or if I think I'm this mind, attending to my thoughts is attending to myself. There are many people who say, all you have to do is witness your thoughts. The thoughts are something other than ourselves. Attending to thoughts is not attending to ourselves. We need to attend to, not to the thoughts, but to the thinker. To who is it who is aware of these thoughts? So we have to constantly turn our attention back towards ourselves, back towards away from everything that is perceived to the perceiver. If you're there, Alex, if you've got any more questions on self-inquiry, I could answer now, but that's just, oh yes, I see you are there. Is there anything else you wanted to ask about self-inquiry, Alex?
Thank you very much. It's just sometimes to make a distinguish, a difference between, like you were saying, like a type of vipassana meditation where you are concentrating on your thoughts or on other objects, as opposed to bringing it into yourself. That's sometimes a bit difficult to make, you know.
It may seem difficult at first, but the more we try to turn our attention away from the thoughts, away from the feelings, away from everything, away from objects, away from phenomena, towards that which is aware of them, towards that which is perceiving them, the more we practice that, the clearer it will become, the simpler it will become. Actually, there's nothing easier than being self-attentive. But we have to familiarize ourselves with that. But even when it's clear what is self-attentiveness, it still seems difficult because of our lack of willingness to let go of other things, because we still have desires and attachments. So the struggle continues up to the end.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving the talks. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay. And then Subbu, you had a question?
Hello, Michael. Thanks for taking my question. It's less of a question. Actually, I seek your blessings, because the ultimate answer to every question is who is asking this question. I can understand this theoretically, and I think I've understood this for 4 years. But this ṉiṭṭaiyuṛak is not happening. It's not even moving slowly towards that path. When the question arises, I try to answer it. I really seek your blessing so that I will go the right path.
There's only one. The only one who can bless us is Bhagavan. I am in the same boat as you. I am just an ordinary spiritual aspirant. So I'm unqualified to bless anyone. Bhagavan is always blessing us, but we derive the benefit of his blessing to the extent to which we turn within and subside. So we have to, however difficult it seems to be, we have to continue trying. So long as we are trying to the best of our ability, Bhagavan will take care of everything else. So Bhagavan's grace, Bhagavan's blessings are never lacking. They're always there. He's always providing us all the help that is required. But a little bit, there's a small responsibility for us to try to follow what he taught us, to try to surrender ourselves to him. he will take care of everything else. Even when we don't turn our attention within and surrender ourselves, he's still taking care of everything. But the more we yield ourselves to him by turning our attention within, the less we are obstructing the work of his grace.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you.
Yeah. So if you want blessings, ask Bhagavan. I mean, Bhagavan is already blessing you, but the benefit of asking for Bhagavan's blessings, we are to that extent, we are willing to yield ourselves to his blessing. So we're asking Bhagavan not because he doesn't know, but we need his blessings. He knows what we need better than we know it. But by praying to him, we are giving our consent. We are accepting that how dependent we are on his grace.
Thank you. I'll try and practice that. Thank you.
And prayer definitely has its place, because Bhagavan has sung so many beautiful prayers in Arunachal Panchakam. So if we want to know how to pray properly, Bhagavan, the path of prayer has been clearly taught to us. What we should pray for, how we should pray, has all been taught in Arunachal Panchakam.
Okay, I'll start reading it. Okay.
Okay, I'll read one more email question. The next one is from Saravana Bhavan. You've asked 3 questions. The first one, you say, please comment on helping others or charity work, doing punya, will bring good karma to us. If so, we need to be born again to experience those karmas. So if we don't do this sort of action, will allow us to reach our destiny early. After all, these people who are going through according to their prarabdha karma, and we do not need to worry about them. Yeah, we shouldn't go out seeking to help others. But when occasion arises, if someone comes to us for help, we help in a normal way. But that is not our aim. Our central concern, if it's our destiny to help others, we'll help them. And if it's their destiny to be helped by us, they'll be helped by us. We need not concern ourselves about such things. Our only concern should be to surrender ourselves. As Bhagavan said, rather than when that one Parameshwara Shakti is driving all karyas, why should we, instead of surrendering ourselves to that, be constantly thinking, ipadi vendam, apadi vendam. It's necessary to do this, it's necessary to do that. What is to be done, he will make us do. Let's leave all action, all concern about action, let's leave to him. Our only concern should be to turn our attention within and surrender ourselves to him. Your next question is, praying for others for their liberation from samsara by us is how much appropriate? We are seeing this sort of action, especially after they left the body. What benefit will it bring to them and us? Or is this an illusion and we're doing it as a courtesy? What will be the consequence of not doing this? Once someone asked Bhagavan about that is, as you know, Hindus do certain rituals after someone passes away for the first 10 days. I mean, other rituals, and then every year they do they do annual ceremonies for those who have passed away. Once someone asked Bhagavan whether if there's any good in doing such things, Bhagavan said, yes, it is good for those who do it. That is, if people who, for the doers of those actions, that is good. Because why are they doing it? They're doing it for someone else. So the actions we do for others is good for us. As Bhagavan says in the final 2 sentences of the 19th paragraph of Nana, Piruku Oruvan Kodupidellam Tanake Kodutu kol kiran. All that one gives to others, one is giving only to oneself. Ivunmeye arindal evantan kodatad orivan. That is, if one knew this truth, who indeed would remain without giving? So by doing these rituals for the deceased relatives, we are doing for them, but by doing for them, we are doing good for ourselves. So the benefit of such things is for ourselves. But all these rituals, it may be, if we are born in a certain, for example, if we are born in a Brahmin family, all these things may be expected of us, and we may have to do all these rituals. But these rituals are no longer important once we come to the true spiritual path. Once we come to the path of surrender, all these rituals become superfluous. If according to the expectations of our family, etc., we have to continue them, there's no harm in continuing them, but they're not important for us. If we are on the path of surrender, we've gone beyond the need for all rituals. But there's no harm in the rituals continuing if that is appropriate to the circumstances in which we find ourselves. The next question you asked is, a realized person once left his body, why are we doing ritual to the body in the name of samadhi and subsequently building a temple and worshipping? What is the significance of this, even though we know the body is not the person? Yes, the Bhagavan is not his body, but the body is that body that we saw as Bhagavan, the body Ramana Maharshi, was the temple in which Bhagavan lived for 54 years, giving us his teachings. So, according to Tirumula, one of the ancient Tamil siddhas, the body of the jnani is the temple of God. So it is appropriate. He says it is not appropriate to. Usually in India, most people are cremated. In the Hindu custom is generally cremation. But for the jnani, at least in South India, those who are following Tirumula, they don't cremate the body of jnani. They bury the body of jnani and build a temple over it, because the body of the jnani is a temple. It's a temple in which God walked on earth, so to speak. So it is appropriate to worship the tomb or the samadhi of jnanis. That's why Bhagavan's body and the body of some of Bhagavan's close devotees have been buried and are duly worshipped. That is appropriate. But again, if we worship Bhagavan's shrine, if we're doing so out of love, we need not consider that as a ritual. It's not ritual worship, it's just a simple expression of our love. Ritual worship also goes on there. That is also appropriate for those who do it. So the rituals we need not give too much importance to. But if we're fortunate to go to Tiruvannamalai, we can go to Bhagavan's shrine, we can prostrate before it, we can walk around it, we can sit quietly in front of it, we can worship in whatever way appeals to us. But that's simply, we need not consider that as a ritual. We're just expressing our love for Bhagavan. Just as if we have been there when he was, during his bodily lifetime, we would have liked to spend time in his company. We would have liked to sit at his feet, just to look at him or whatever, because of our love for him. So it's natural that that continues even now. And your fourth and final question is, people who announce to be self-realized by learning Vedas and scriptures, according to some of their view, Bhagavan path is lacking that much of knowledge. My ego feels their concept as they are traveling in the first class and others in economy class. Will both teams reach the same destiny at the same time, or will they reach the destiny earlier or late, as they are still keeping their ego? Yes, there are people who think that, there's some Advaitin, some teachers of Advaita who consider themselves as traditional Vedantins, as they call themselves, they think that Bhagavan is not a proper guru because he never studied the Upanishads and other texts and the commentaries on them, and he himself never had a guru in their view. But actually, Bhagavan is the guru of all gurus. Bhagavan is Arunachala himself, who is, and Arunachala is Dakshinamurti, the Adi Guru. So these people, they're just expressing anyone who thinks Bhagavan's path is in any way inadequate, they are just expressing their own ignorance. So we need not be concerned about them. And yes, we eventually, according to Bhagavan, we will all reach the same destination. That is, we will all return to our source. But how quickly we will return to our source depends upon the degree to which we are surrendered. So if we've got a strong ego and we think I'm superior, I'm following a superior path and these people are following an inferior path, so long as that ego is there, we are delaying our progress. The progress in the spiritual path is the extent to which ego subsides. So we are no better than anyone else. Only when we understand that are we beginning to follow the spiritual path. So long as we think I'm superior, I'm a first-class traveler and they're just second-class, economy class travelers, that ego is it will be preventing us from following the spiritual path. Have I adequately answered these questions of yours, Taravan Bhavan? Okay. Okay, Rama, you have your hand up. Would you like to ask a question?
Namaskaram, Michael.
Namaskaram.
I had this question in the beginning of the conversation, but I think most of it has got already answered. But since I thought I will, bring it up with you, I'm bringing it up. So in terms of we are given a body and mind. So we have to have some actions, we have to have some duties that we have to fulfill. So one of the things that Bhagavan, I believe, advised some devotees, and I heard this from David Godman also, is that, the one way to reduce the ego is what you consider as most, dear to you and most things that you feel that you cannot do yourself, give it to Bhagavan. And then, once that gets fulfilled, you slowly start getting the faith that, you are not the person who is doing it, but Bhagavan is doing it for you. And I've been trying to follow this path to some extent, but it seems more and more elusive in this whole process. And I was just wondering whether it is even worth following that process. Should I just not even think about any of this? And, take what is the right way to, fulfill our duties and get onto this spiritual path. I mean, we are doing our path already, but in a more accelerated way. That's what I was looking for an answer.
The path of surrender has been very, very briefly, but very clearly explained by Bhagavan in the 13th paragraph of Nana. Ultimately, self-surrender is, we can surrender ourselves completely only by Atma-chintana, that is by being so keenly self-attentive that we give no room to the rising of other thoughts. So, but maybe we are not yet ready to surrender ourselves to that extent, but at least we can begin by leaving our cares and concerns to Bhagavan, thinking that I'll surrender this thing, and if it produces a successful result, then I'll have more faith, then so long as we're looking for a result, we are not surrendering. Surrendering means we leave it to Bhagavan. Bhagavan knows what is best. He knows how to, Bhagavan will provide whatever is needed. He will do whatever is needed. Bhagavan is ready even to think for us. As he says in the 13th paragraph, Isam peril evlo barate potalum avalavayum ava vahitu kol kiran. So however much burden we place on God, he will bear all of it. So if we know that, if we understand that, we can leave even the burden of thinking to him. So the path of surrender is the path of letting go, the path of ceasing to be concerned about other things, knowing that Bhagavan is taking care of everything perfectly. Bhagavan is taking care of us, he's taking care of our family, he's taking care of everything. He is the one Parameshwara Shakti who is driving all karyas. So let us just leave it to him. Why should we be perpetually thinking it's necessary to do like this, it's necessary to do like that? Ipadi vendam, apadi vendam. That's what Bhagavan says there. Then he gives that beautiful analogy. When you're traveling on a train, why to carry your burden? Why to suffer carrying your burden on your head instead of just putting it aside and traveling comfortably and happily? So the more we give up all our cares and concerns, even the concern about how to surrender to Bhagavan, let us leave even that to him. Bhagavan, I cannot surrender to you. You make me surrender to you. Even that we leave to him. So putting the entire burden on him, that is the path of surrender. And putting the entire burden on him means without expecting any result. If we think, if I surrender, there has to be such and such a result, then only I'll know that my surrender is working. That is not surrender. Surrender means being unconcerned about the result, being unconcerned about both the means and the end. Leave everything to Bhagavan. Because he will, whatever you leave to him, whatever burden you leave to him, he will bear all of it. So why should we take on the burden of thinking? Why should we take on the burden of thinking we have to make decisions? Whatever decision, whatever is to be decided has already been decided. We will be made to make decisions according to what is already destined according to prarabdha. So let us leave everything to him. If we are so concerned about everything else, all the actions of our body, speech, and mind will be only according to prarabdha. Our will not be interfering. But if we don't surrender, then our will comes and interferes, and we're constantly thinking, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to decide this, I have to decide that. Should I do this? Should I do that? All this sort of thing is there. If we surrender, we can leave all those concerns to Bhagavan. Then he will make our body, speech, and mind do whatever is necessary. Does that help to answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you.
So the surrender must be completely without any expectation of any result. The only result, the result of the true result of self-surrender is complete eradication of ego. Whatever happens before that, that is according to destiny. Let's leave that to Bhagavan. So I'll read one more email. This is an email from Jose. He says, you've mentioned in a few satsangs the idea that moksha and deep sleep are the same. There are multiple ways to interpret this. I'll allow myself to outline a few options. One, they're identical, meaning the body of a jnani is equivalent to that of a permanent sleepwalker whose real inner state is asleep. The body seems to be awake, however, acting mechanically according to destiny. The inner jnani is happily asleep, never to be woken up. That's option one. Two, they're somewhat identical, meaning a jnani is not really a sleepwalker, but his cognitive abilities decrease to the bare minimum. At this level, there simply is much happiness, but no intelligence for things other than self-awareness. Three, they're similar, meaning a jnani is not a sleepwalker at all, neither does any cognitive ability decrease, but he's rather a person whose happiness in deep sleep permeates through the hours of the waking state. This happiness shines so clearly, but the waking state is not that attractive anymore. Fear for death and attraction for worldly affairs disappears. And then the fourth option you offer is they're not the same, but they do share one common feature, lack of thoughts, meaning no thoughts, no problems. In this state, there isn't any special happiness, but at least the mind is not there to poke around with worldly affairs. This is simply experienced as everlasting peace. And then you conclude by saying, could you please help us to determine which of the statements above to be a better approximation to the message you were originally trying to convey? When I say moksha and deep sleep, that is the state of jnana, the state of pure awareness, and deep sleep, essentially they are the same, because they are both states without mind. And without mind, in the absence of mind, there are no differences. The difference between the two, moksha is manonasa, that is annihilation of mind. Sleep is manolaya, a temporary dissolution of mind. So the difference between them is that sleep is temporary and moksha is eternal. However, this difference is not a difference experienced in sleep, it's a difference experienced only from the perspective of the mind in waking and dream. Regarding the options you give, the first one, that the body of, when you say the body of a jnani is equivalent to that of a permanent sleepwalker whose inner state is asleep, Bhagavan has written a verse 31 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham, in which he has expressed this idea. I'll just read to you the verse. What Bhagavan says in verse 31 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, he gives an analogy of a person sleeping in a cart. So what he says in this verse is, to the main jnani, that's to the knower of reality, who is asleep within the fleshy body, which is like a cart, activity, meaning activity of body and mind, niṭṭha, that means a state of steadiness or inactivity or samadhi, and sleep are just like to a person sleeping in a cart, that cart moving, standing, or the cart remaining alone. That is just like the various states of a cart are not experienced by a person who's sleeping in it. The various states of body and mind are not experienced by the jnani, because the jnani is asleep to the appearance of body and world, but awake to what is real. That is why the state of jnana is sometimes called the state of waking sleep, because the jnani is awake to pure awareness and asleep to everything else. So what you say in this first one is more or less correct. The jnani, because we take Bhagavan to be a person, as a person he has a body and mind, and he's aware of the world, and he answers questions, and he writes poems, and he cuts vegetables, and he does all these actions. But Bhagavan said all the actions of the jnani are only in the view of the ajnani, who mistakes the jnani to be the body and mind. That is, because we mistake ourselves to be a body and mind, we mistake Bhagavan to be a body and mind. But what Bhagavan actually is just pure awareness. And in the view of pure awareness is awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself. So in the view of Bhagavan as pure awareness, there is nothing other than himself. There is just pure awareness. The second one you said, but the jnani's cognitive abilities decrease. When you talk about the jnani, are you talking about the person the jnani seems to be, or the pure awareness that the jnani actually is? So long as we take Bhagavan to be a person, yes, as a person he has all cognitive abilities. He's aware of what's happening, he answers questions, all these things. But he says, all these are only in the view of, in your ignorant view, because you don't see yourself as pure awareness. Because we don't see ourselves as pure awareness, we cannot see Bhagavan as pure awareness. But what he actually is only pure awareness. Regarding the, in the third one you say the jnani is rather a person. The jnani is not a person. That's where we make the mistake. But so long as we take a jnani to be a person, he's rather a person whose happiness in deep sleep permeates through the hours of the waking state. Yes, we can say this. So long as we take Bhagavan to be a person, he is equally, the happiness that he experiences in sleep, he's experiencing even now in the waking state. So he is unaffected by the changes of state from waking sleep, dream to sleep. That's one way of saying it. If we take him to be a person, so long as we take him to be a person, we have to say he's unaffected by all these things. And then the last one you say, that they share one common feature, lack of thoughts. Not only do they share lack of thoughts includes the first thought I, that's ego. So in the state of jnana and in the state of sleep, there is no ego. Because there's no ego, ego is the first thought I, so there are no other thoughts. And because there's no ego and no thoughts, there are no differences. So we cannot say any differences, but it's only from the perspective of the mind in waking and dream that there seem to be differences between moksha and deep sleep. And then you say, in this state, there isn't any special happiness. That is where it's wrong. Happiness, according to Bhagavan, happiness is our real nature. So that the state of jnana, like the state of sleep, is a state of perfect happiness, unalloyed happiness. Why? The problem is, we do not remember, though we are aware that we existed in sleep and we were aware of our existence in sleep, we cannot clearly remember how we experienced ourselves in sleep. In sleep, we experienced ourselves as infinite happiness. But because we now mistake ourselves to be this person, we cannot recollect the infinite happiness that we experienced in sleep. We know generally sleep is a state of peace, but the infinite happiness that we experienced in sleep, we cannot now recall. If you're there, Jose, there's one other verse I wanted to refer to in this context. That is the next verse of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham, verse 32, because this is also a very important verse to understand the subject you're asking about. That is what Bhagavan says in verse 32 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham. For those who experience waking, dream, and sleep, waking sleep, which is beyond these three, is called turiya. That is okay, I'll explain after. Since that turiya alone exists, and since the three states that appear do not exist, be assured that turiya is actually turiyatita. Turiyatita means beyond the fourth. I'll explain that. That is, it is said in some of the Upanishads, but there are not just three states, there's the fourth state. The fourth state is the state of pure awareness, which is the background in which the other three states appear. That state of pure awareness is sometimes described as waking sleep. And Bhagavan says here that is beyond these three. It is beyond these three in the sense that it is the screen on which these three appear. The waking, dream, and sleep are just appearances in the state of turiya. And Bhagavan says turiya alone is what actually exists, and these states, three states that appear, do not exist. So waking, dream, and sleep exist only in our ignorant view. The two states in which we experience phenomena we call waking and dream. According to Bhagavan, they're only one state, because what we now take to be waking is just another dream. So any state in which we experience, so those two states are reduced to one state. So any state in which we experience phenomena is a dream. And sleep, the state in which we don't experience phenomena, in other words, the state in which dream is absent, we call sleep. That is actually our real state. But because from our point of view, from the point of view of our mind in waking or dream, sleep seems to be a third state. So there seems to be a distinction between sleep and waking sleep. But Bhagavan says ultimately, waking sleep alone is real. So what we now see as sleep is actually waking sleep. We call it sleep because it seems to be a temporary state. But it seems to be a temporary state only from the perspective of ego in waking and dream. So when we know what our real nature is, we will know that we are eternally asleep, and there never was any state other than sleep. Sleep alone is the real state. That is sleep alone. Sleep is what is otherwise called turiya.